Assalamu alaikum dear students, I am Nur Muhammad, your English teacher, and it is our third lecture on word classes or parts of speech, and we are going to study verb as the third major word class today. We are going to begin with a simple definition of verb right in the beginning, and here it is. What is verb? Verb is a word that shows action or event. I repeat, verb is a word that typically shows action or event. It also shows action. So according to this definition, there are three major functions that are performed by verb. Verb shows action, verb shows event, and verb shows state. Now if you want to understand what exactly is a verb, you need to have a firm grip upon the concept of action, event, especially these two, and then state. Comparatively, we are going to discuss them, compare and contrast them. So you need to have a firm grip upon the concept of action or event, and then you will be in a position to understand what exactly is a verb and what is the function that is performed by verb. So for this purpose, I am going to make a simple illustration of action or event. So here it is. What is action? Action means change of state. Verb shows action. And what is action? Action stands for change of event, change of state. When a state changes, so to say, mathematically, using mathematical variable, when a state changes from A to B, this is called as action. Change of state is called as action. In case of event, change of state is called as action, and in case of state, no change. So one thing is for sure, action stands for change of state. And what is this change of state? Let me give you a little practical demonstration of what do we mean by change of state. So I have a marker in my hand, for example, right in front of you. Now this is, for example, this is state A. This is state 1. And now I drop it down. It goes down to the floor. This is state B. This is state number 2. This is a change of state. At state A or state 1, I had marker in my hand, and then I dropped it, and now it is there down on the floor. It's state B. This is what we call as change of state. You can clearly see is there is a change of state. Marker was in my hand and marker is not in my hand. Marker is on the floor. This is called as change of state. And what is the English word that we use to represent this change of state? We can say drop. Yes, I have dropped the marker, or I can simply say I dropped the marker. Fine, the word drop shows or represents this change of state. So therefore, the word drop is a verb. So because the word drop actually represents change of state, in the same way, I'm standing right in front of you right here. Now this is state A, and then I take a step forward. Now this is the change of state from A to B. So look at me. So this is state A, and then I take a step. This is state B, or change of state. Clearly you can see it. And then what is the word that we use for this change of state? Walk. Walk is the word that we use for it. So that's why walk is called as a verb, because it represents change of state. In the same way, I have this marker in my hand, for example, so look at it. So I have it in my hand. This is state A, and then I start writing. Clearly from state A to state B, there is a change of state. Previously my hand was at the first stage. At the first state, my hand was like this, and then it moves like this. There is a change of state. So this change of state is called action. So what is the word that represents this change of state? Write. Fine. This is the reason we call write as a verb. I think you have now a fair idea of what exactly is meant by action. Change of state is called action. And all those words in English language that represent this change of state, they are called as verbs. So this is the reason why eat is called as a verb. Write is called as a verb. Walk is called as a verb. Read is called as a verb. And in the same way, there are thousands of such words in English language that represent changes of states. This is the reason we call them as verbs. So I hope that you've got the basic concept of what we mean by action. Action means change of state. So same is the case with, let's come towards the next one, event. What is event? Event is also a change of state. Then what is the difference between action or event? Typically we believe that this one, action, is willful. This is willful change of state, and this one is not willful. So what is the difference between willful and not willful? When you change the state consciously, deliberately, willfully, that's called as action. When the change in state takes place, not because you did it consciously, you did not do it consciously, you did not do it deliberately, that's called as event. This is something that you need to keep in mind. So willful change of state is called as action, and the change of state which is not willful is called, which is not consciously done, which is not deliberately done, that's called as event. And state is no change. So you can clearly see that state is the exact opposite of event and action. This is something quite unusual. English verbs perform contradictory functions. They perform opposite functions. So if verb shows action, change of state, if verb shows event, change of state, then we do not expect from verb to show no change state, but that is the case. But we can explain it. That's why if you look at the list of verbs in English language, there are very few verbs in English language that show state. Very few. Overwhelming majority of verbs in English language, they show action or event. This was our brief discussion of the basic definition of verb. What is verb? Verb is a word that shows action. And what is action? Change of state. Willful change of state. And what is event? Event is a change of state, but it is not willful. It makes no difference whether it is willful or it is not willful. Simply, change of state is something that is represented by verbs in English language or in other languages for that matter. And in some cases, very few cases, very rare cases, not really rare, but few cases, some verbs in English language also show no change, and thus we call them as representatives of state. This was the basic concept of verb. This is the reason we say walk, murder, eat, sleep, swim, jump, write, read, and so many other thousands of verbs are called as verbs because they are basically the representatives of what we call as action or event. This was our brief discussion of verb and the concept of verb. Let's come towards the forms of verbs. Kids, there are 6 forms of verb in English language. There are 6 forms of verb in English language, and they go like this. The first one is called as base or zero form of the verb. The second one is called as general present tense form. The third one is called as third person singular form. And the fourth one is called as past form. And the fifth one is called as past participle form. And the sixth one is called as present participle form. And there are three examples in front of you to give you an idea of what are these three forms and how do they change and they are different from each other. So, base form or zero form? Be is zero form. Go is zero or base form. Walk is zero or base form. The simplest form is called as base form. The simplest form is called as zero form. Keep that in mind. And next one, general present tense form. M and R, they are the general present tense forms of be. And go is the general present tense form of go. See, there is no difference between zero form of go and general present tense form of go. Coming towards this one, walk, there is no difference between general present tense form of walk and base form of walk. So these are the examples of base or zero forms and general present tense forms. Third form is called as third person singular form with he, she, it or any noun. Is the third person singular form of be. Goes is the third person singular form of go. And walks is the third person form of walk. And coming towards this one, this is the past form. The fourth form is past form. We also call past form as second form. So what is the second form? Was, were is the past form of be. Went is the past form of go. Walked is the past form of walk. You are quite familiar with them. Coming towards the fifth form, past participle form. And past participle form is also called as third form in common language, in ordinary discussion. Been is the third form of be. Been is the past participle form of be. Gone is the past participle form or third form of go. Walked, like walked, you know, the past form. It is the past participle form of walk. And last but not the least is the present participle form. And we also call it as fourth form, the ing form. So what is it? Being. All of them have ing at the end. So ing form, being is the present participle form of be. Going is the present participle form of go. And walking is the present participle form of walk. So this was our brief discussion of the six forms of English verbs. I hope you've got an idea. Let's come towards the next point. We have divided these six forms into two categories: tensed forms and non-tensed forms. So you need to have the basic idea of what we mean by tense. What is tense? I've written it over here. Tense is the ability of a verb to show time. Tense is the ability of a verb to show time. If a verb shows time, we will call it as tensed form of the verb. If a form of verb does not show time, we will call as non-tensed form. So there are, out of these six forms that I have discussed there, out of these six forms, 3 are non-tensed forms and 3 of them are tensed form. What are non-tensed forms and what are tensed form? We have written them over here. Tensed forms: general present tense form, which we also call as the first form. Third person singular form with s or es, which we also call as the first form. Both of them are called as first forms in common language. And past form, second form of the verb. These 3 forms of English verb out of 6, they show time. These 3 forms of verb show time, and the rest of them, base or zero form, present participle form, fourth form, and past participle form, third form, they do not show time. That's why they are called as non-tensed forms. Let me give you a practical demonstration of how verbs show time and how verbs don't show time. Let me talk about that in detail. So this is, for example, the first general present tense form. They go to school. Let's talk about it. They go to school. Now this is general present tense form. What is the time of this sentence? The time of this sentence is present. We know it very well that this tense describes a situation in present. This sentence, they go to school, it describes a situation in the present time. Let's talk about this one. Second one, he goes to school. Now here is the use of third person singular form. Now what is the time of the situation? He goes to school. Clearly this is also present. So this is also a present time situation. Let's talk about this one, past form, the second form. Let me write it here. He went to school. Now the question is, what is the time of the situation described by this sentence? What is the time of the situation described by this sentence containing this verb, past form? So clearly it is past. See, the first two, they describe present time, and the last one, it describes the past time. That's why we call general present tense form and third person singular form and past form as tensed verbs, because they represent times. They show times, and there are two times that they show. Two of them, the first two, general present tense form and the third person singular form. These two forms show present time. Whenever they are used, they show present time, and this one, it shows past time. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. Coming towards this one, zero form, it does not show any time. That's why it is called as non-tensed form. What is? I've used go as a verb here. So what is the zero form of go? Zero form of go is also go. So let me use it here. He can go now. This is zero form. If you don't know the difference between zero form and or the base form, the zero form and the general present tense form, I will explain it later on. This is zero form. He can go now. What is the time of this sentence? Again, we can safely say it's present. He can go now. What is the time of the situation in this sentence? It's present time. And if I write, he could go. What about this one? He could go. Now we have the same go over here, but the time of the situation is in this sentence is past. He can go now, present time. He could go, past time. Look, this sentence contains present time and this sentence contains past time, but both of them have zero forms of the verb. He can go now, go is zero form. He could go is zero form. In both these sentences, the same zero form of the verb, go, the same base form of the verb, go, has been used. But in both the sentences, the times are different. In one sentence, the time is present. In the other sentence, the time is past. So it means that zero form of the verb does not show time. If it had shown time, then it would either show present time in both the sentences, or past time in the both sentences, or future time in the both sentences. But see, same zero form of the verb has been used in the two sentences, and still the time of the two sentences, the times of the two sentences are different. In one case, present time, in the second case, past time. I hope you are getting along. I hope you are getting my point. Let's talk about, that's why base or zero form of the verb is called as non-tensed form, because it does not show time. Present participle form, let's talk about that. He is going to school. What is the time of this sentence? He is going. You know it, it's present time. We are talking about the present time, present continuous. We are talking about present time. So he is going, present time. It's present tense. Okay? What about this one? He was going. What about this one? He was going. It's past time. So see, in this example, we have used present participle form of go, and it shows present time. In this example, we have again used the present participle form of go, that is going, but in this case it is showing past time. See, in both the examples, in both the sentences, the verb is present participle form, but the time of both the sentences is different. In one case it is present time, in the other case it is past time. So it means that present participle form, the fourth form of the verb, does not show time. If it had shown time, then both the sentences would have had the same time. If one was present time, the other would be the present time. If one had been the past time, the other would have been the past time. But that's not the case. You can clearly see that verb is the same, but the time of both these sentences is different. It means going does not show, present participle form does not show time. It is this verb, the first one, that shows time. It is this verb, can, could, they show the time. Can shows present time, could shows past time, not go. In this example, is shows present time, was shows past time, and going in both cases is not showing any time. I hope you are getting my point. That's why present participle form of the verb, fourth form of the verb, the ing form of the verb, is called as non-tensed form, because it does not show time. Keep that in mind. Past participle form, third form of the verb, it also doesn't show time. For example, he has gone. See, he has gone. What is the time? Clearly present. And what about this sentence? He had gone. What about this one? It's past time. Everybody knows it's past tense. Okay? So this sentence shows present time, and this sentence shows past time. But in both cases, gone, the past participle form have been used. So in both cases, the form of the verb, past participle form, has been used. So gone here, but time present in this example and time past in this example. So it means that past participle form of the verb, in this case gone, does not show time. Why? Because in these two examples, the same past participle verb has been used, the same past participle form of the verb has been used, but the time in both the sentences is different. So what is the reason? The reason is that gone, past participle form of the verb does not show time. That's why it is called as non-tensed form. It is has, the third person singular form, and had, the past form. They show the time, not gone. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. I hope you have now understood the difference between the tensed forms of the verb and the non-tensed forms of the verb. I repeat, tense is the ability of a verb to show time. Out of the 6 forms of verb that we have discussed, 3 show time and 3 do not show time. The 3 forms of the verb that show time are general present tense form, third person singular form, and past form. The first two, general present tense form and third person singular form, show present time, and the last one, past form, the third one, it shows past time. So these are the three tense forms of the verb, and the other zero or base form of the verb, present participle form of the verb, and past participle form of the verb. They do not show time. That's why they are called as non-tensed verbs or non-tensed forms of verbs. I hope you've got the idea. So this was our brief discussion of what we call as different forms of verb and how they perform the function of showing time and not showing time. So this was something that you need to understand. Just for the sake of knowledge, we are going to now talk about forms of Urdu verb. Forms of Urdu verb. There are 6 verbs. There are 6 forms of verb in English. What about Urdu language? How many forms does an Urdu verb have? Do you know that? Have you ever thought about that? Surprisingly enough, for your knowledge, for your information, the forms of Urdu verbs are far greater in number than the forms of English verb. Urdu language takes lead. Urdu has at least 14 forms of the verb. Surprisingly enough, yes, you heard correctly. 14 forms of the verb. English has just 6 forms of the verb. So this also means, do you know what it means, what it implies? It also means that Urdu language is difficult to learn as compared to Urdu language. We are born speakers of Urdu language. We are speakers of Punjabi language, Pashto language, Saraiki language, Hindko language. For us, learning Urdu is easier because Urdu is similar to Hindko and Punjabi and Saraiki. But remember one thing, when you talk about learning languages, Urdu language is more difficult to learn as compared to English language because there is more complexity in Urdu language than in English language. This is the reason why there are 14 forms of Urdu verb, and this is the reason why English speakers, they always find it difficult to have a good command of Urdu verbs. They would also say an English speaker would make mistakes, and even Afghanis, when they speak Urdu, they make mistakes, and they cannot have a good command. They don't have a good command of Urdu forms of verbs, the forms of Urdu verb. And for example, an English speaker would say, "Hum usse milna chahta hai," and he would say, "Hum usse pakadna manta hai." They cannot say "hu" and "hai." They feel a lot of trouble in commanding those forms of Urdu verbs that have noon gunna at the end. Whether they have wow plus noon gunna or ye plus noon gunna, this noon gunna that is used at the end is rarely pronounced by Afghanis. They hardly have a command of different forms of Urdu verb that have ye plus noon gunna or wow plus noon gunna. You would never hear an Englishman, or you would very rarely hear an Englishman or even Afghani who could say "hum." They would always say "hai." "Oh, acha aadmi hai." And they would never be able to say "main acha aadmi hu." They would say "hum acha aadmi hai." And he would never say "tum ache aadmi ho." They would say "tum acha aadmi hai." So they find it really difficult to have a command of different forms of Urdu verb. There are 14 forms of Urdu verbs. Clearly, they are difficult to have a command of, and 6 forms of the English verb, they are so easy. Let's talk about the 14 forms of Urdu verb. What are they? Let's start with a simple one. Likhna. Write. Okay? Let me write it over here. Likhna. This is first form. Next one. Likh. Another one. And then likho, another one, and then लिखिए, another one. लिखना, लिख, लिखो, लिखिए. These are the starting. लिखते, see, लिखता, लिखती, लिखते. And then let's talk about this one. लिखा, लिखे, लिखी. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 4 forms left. Okay. Now let's talk about the other. लिखनी, मुझे नज़्म लिखनी है. That is where we can use it. लिखने, लिखनी, लिखने. See, लिखनी, लिखने. And लिखना we have already used it over here. So 12, and then we can also add 1 or 2 more. For example, लिखूं, and for example, लिखें. So now there are 14 forms of Urdu verb. लिखना, लिख, लिखो, लिखिए, लिखता, लिखती, लिखते, लिखा, लिखे, लिखी, लिखनी, लिखने, लिखूं, लिखे, लिखूं, लिखनी, लिखना, लिखे. See how difficult they are to have a good command. They are so complex. There are minor changes at the end. We call them as inflections. So there are minor changes. Choti ye, badi ye, alaf, and then noon gunna, and stuff like that. It makes things so complex. It may be easy for you or for me, being Hindi or Urdu speakers or Punjabi speakers or Pashto speakers, or even remember Saraiki speakers. It's easy for us because Urdu is our second language, second mother language you can call it, remember. But it's difficult. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. If there are more of them, you can talk about that. You can tell me. But there are at least 14 forms of Urdu verb. And you can also then look for forms like, for example, khana. Now go for it. Khana, kha, khao, khaiye, khata, khati, khate, khaya, khaye, khai, khani, khane, khaun, khaye. So you can add more of them. So these are the forms of Urdu verb. 14 forms of Urdu verb, more than the double. Let me ask you another question. Do you know how many forms of verb are there in Arabic language? Just guess. There are 32 forms of verbs in English, in Arabic language. Wow, that's a staggering number. There are 32, and if you take out the identical forms, two of them are identical, then you can say there are at least 30 forms of Arabic verb. That's why Arabic, along with Chinese, is considered as one of the most difficult languages to learn. It's the language of our Prophet. It's the language of Quran and Hadith. So it's easy for us. We have natural connections with it, religious connections with it. So we have some association with Arabic language. That's why we can learn it. But Arabic is still very difficult to have a good command of. So even if we pray in Arabic, we read the Holy Quran, still Arabic language is a very difficult language. So Chinese and Arabic language are considered as the most difficult languages. The complexity of their verb forms can actually give you some idea that Arabic language has 32 forms. And if you take out the identical forms, there are at least 30 forms of Arabic verb. Just think about the staggering number of verb forms in Arabic language. This was our discussion of forms. 6 forms in English language, 14 forms in Urdu language, and 32 forms in Arabic language. I hope you have got the idea. Let's come towards now the different kinds of verb. So we have discussed the forms and now we are going to discuss the kinds of English verb. So let's begin with the kinds of English verb. How many kinds? I'm going to take into account only those kinds of English verbs that are important from the point of view of your level, intermediate level. Okay, you need to have some good command of these forms of these kinds of verb, and the concepts of these different kinds of verb will help you in the long run. The first one is auxiliary or helping verb. The first kind of verb is auxiliary or helping verb. What is it? Just for the sake of definition, a verb that is used before another verb, main verb. A verb that is used before another verb to show time, aspect and mood is called auxiliary or helping verb. One thing is for sure, an auxiliary verb by this definition always has a verb after it. An auxiliary verb or a helping verb always has a verb after it. If a verb does not have another verb after it, you will never call it as auxiliary verb. A verb having no other verb after it cannot be called as auxiliary verb or helping verb. Keep that in mind. That is a tip written over here. Auxiliary or helping verb always has a verb after it. So this is, and what does it mean? Time, you know it very well. What is aspect? What is mood? This is not the proper time to discuss the terms like aspect or mood. Well, let me explain it briefly. Aspect means continuity or completion. Whether the time is continuous, the situation is continuous, or it has completed. Mood basically means feelings, attitude. What is it? We will discuss it some other day in detail. These three attributes, these three functions of verb. So, what is the first kind of verb? Auxiliary verb. And I've just told you, auxiliary verb is a kind of verb that has a verb after it. And it performs three functions: shows time, aspect, and mood. But the thing that you need to keep in mind is that auxiliary verb always has a verb after it. If a verb does not have a verb after it, you can never call it as auxiliary verb. Here are some examples. You know, he is my brother. This one is verb. But is it an auxiliary verb? Is it a helping verb? No. You know why? Because there is no verb after it. Is the only verb used in the sentence, he is my brother. Because is the only verb, you can never call it as helping verb. Then what is it? We are going to talk about that. He is reading a novel. Now there are two verbs. This one is verb and this one is verb. Because is has a verb after it, reading, so that's why it will be called as auxiliary verb. Let's come toward this third example. He has been reading a novel. Three verbs. Verb 1, verb 2 and verb 3. There are three verbs after it. This verb has two verbs after it, so this is auxiliary verb. This verb been has one verb after it, so this is also auxiliary verb. But this one does not have any verb after it, so it will not be called as auxiliary verb. Let's talk about this one. Should is a verb, have is a verb, been is a verb, reading is a verb. Clearly, should has three verbs after it, it's auxiliary. Have has two verbs after it, it's auxiliary. Been has one verb after it, it's auxiliary. Reading does not have any verb after it, it's not auxiliary or helping verb. So these four examples now clarify the point. What exactly is meant by an auxiliary verb or helping verb, and why a helping verb always has at least one verb after it. It should have one verb after it, otherwise it will not be called as a helping verb or auxiliary verb. Remember the word auxiliary or helping. Auxiliary, or you can say subordinate, serving, and helping also means to serve. So the very title, the very name shows helping verb, the verb that helps another verb, the verb that serves another verb. And there are three ways of serving: showing time, showing aspect, showing mood. that we will discuss at some other forum later on. So this is the basic concept. Remember, a verb that has another verb after it is called auxiliary. Remember that and fix that in your mind. Let's talk about the other one, kinds of auxiliary verbs. Now there are 4 kinds of auxiliary verb. Keep them in mind and you can count them on your fingertips. The first, do, does, did. They are the first kind of helping verb, auxiliary verb. Be, is, am, are, been, being. That is the second kind of auxiliary verb. Has, have, had. This is the third kind of auxiliary verb. And then modal auxiliaries: can, could, shall, should, will, would, may, might, must, used to, ought to, have to, etc. They are also called as auxiliary verbs. So auxiliary verbs are limited in number, and this is the total number of auxiliary verbs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and add a few more of the modal auxiliaries, semi-modal auxiliaries particularly. You will have the whole list. They are limited in number. They are closed class. So keep that in mind. So this was our discussion of auxiliary verb. The same thing. An auxiliary verb helps another verb that comes after it. If it does not help another verb, if there is no verb after it, it can never be called as auxiliary verb. This was our brief discussion of auxiliary or helping verb. Let's talk about main verb or lexical verb. Main verb or lexical verb is typically contrasted with auxiliary verb. The last verb in a sentence that shows action, that shows event, that represents the situation is called as main verb or lexical verb or principal verb. Keep that in mind. Here is a definition. A verb that shows action, event or state in a sentence. It describes the situation. Basically, the verb that describes the situation. He is sleeping. What is the situation? Someone is sleeping. Sleep is the situation. The verb that describes the situation, sleep, is main verb, sleeping. I am reading a novel. What is the situation in this sentence? The situation of reading. And the word or the verb that shows this situation, read, will be called as the main verb. So the main verb, there are 2 things to remember about it. One, main verb is the last verb. There can, if there is a sentence that has only one verb in it, it can be main verb or it may not be main verb. But one thing is for sure, main verb is the last verb in a sentence. Second, it shows the action, it shows the event, it shows the state, or you can simply say the situation in a sentence is represented by the main verb. Keep that in mind. So main verb is always the last verb. If there are 2 verbs, the last one will be called as main verb. If there are 3 verbs in a sentence, the last verb will be called as main verb. If there are 4 verbs in a sentence, the last one will be called as the main verb. So you had seen example, remember, this is the last verb, there are 2 verbs here. This is the last verb, it will be called as main verb. Has been reading, 3 verbs, this will be called as main verb because it is the last one. Should have been reading, there are 4 verbs and this will be called as the last verb. So the last verb is called as the main verb, and it shows action, it shows event, or it may even show state, but it is a representative of the situation. The situation is described by the main verb. Keep that in mind. This was a brief discussion of main or lexical verb. Main verb is directly contrasted with auxiliary, helping verb. Keep that in mind. An auxiliary verb is not a main verb is not an auxiliary. They are polar parts. Normally, an auxiliary verb helps the main verb. Let's talk about the next one. Copula or linking verb. What is copula or linking verb? Definition shows a verb that links the noun, pronoun, noun phrase, or adjective with the subject. This is a verb that has a noun after it, or a pronoun after it, or an adjective after it. Forget about noun phrase if it complicates things. A verb that has a noun after it, a pronoun after it, an adjective after it, and then it links this noun, pronoun or adjective with the subject before the verb. The verb has a subject before it, and a verb has a noun, pronoun or adjective after it. So the verb that links the noun, the pronoun or the adjective that comes after it with the subject that comes before it, that's called as linking or copula verb. Don't worry, I will explain. Okay, here it is. He is my brother. This is the only verb. Let's see, is it a linking or copula verb? Let's see it. So this is a noun, or you can say noun phrase. Who is my brother? And this is subject. Who is my brother? He is my brother. My brother is he. So it means that my brother and he are the same thing. He is my brother. My brother or he, they are the same thing. So basically this verb is linking subject with the noun that comes after it, or the noun that comes after it with the subject. So see, this is called as integration. It actually, this verb integrates the noun that comes after it with the subject. So this is something that you need to keep in mind, remember. So, and coming towards the next one, Ali is a doctor. Is it a linking verb? See, who is Ali? Ali is a doctor, or doctor is Ali. Doctor is Ali, Ali is doctor. So it is linking Ali with the doctor, doctor with the Ali. Simple. So it's copula or it's linking verb. Let me now contrast it with this one. Ali saw a doctor. Ali saw a doctor. Let's contrast with this one. So now this is verb. Okay? Now tell me, this is a noun and this is subject. Now tell me, is this Dr. Ali? Is Ali this doctor? No, not at all. Ali is a different person and a doctor is different. Ali saw a doctor. So Ali is one participant, one individual, one person, and the doctor that he saw is another one. They are not the same. So that's why this verb, it will not be called as copula. It can never be called as copula. But over here, Ali is a doctor. Ali is doctor, doctor is Ali. They are the same things. So that's why it will be called as copula or linking verb. Same is the case with this one. My cousin was very happy. This is was. Okay? Very happy. My cousin very happy. Who is happy? Cousin. Who is cousin? Very happy. The same thing. So this will be called as copula. They look very confident. Who are confident? They. What are they? Very confident. So in all these four examples, is, was, look are actually linking verbs or copulas because they link the noun, the pronoun, the adjectives that come after them with the subject that come before them. So you need to keep that in mind. This was a brief discussion of what we call as, copula or linking verb. I hope you've got the main point. The next kind of verb is, the fourth one is dynamic verb or static verb. They are the opposites of each other. What is a dynamic verb? As is given over here, a dynamic verb is the one that can be used in progressive or continuous tenses. A static is the opposite one, is the verb which cannot be used in progressive or continuous tenses. What does it mean? Let me explain it, kids. There are some verbs in English language that cannot be used in progressive or continuous tenses. But overwhelming majority of verbs in English language are such that they can easily be used in continuous tenses. For example, he is reading a novel. He is watching TV. He is walking in the ground. They are traveling. They are, for example, talking to someone. So talk, travel, watch, read, all of them are such verbs that are dynamic. Dynamic means, you understand, showing activity, showing action. So they are the verbs. They can easily be used in continuous or progressive sentences. Progressive tenses, I should call that. And majority of the, remember one thing, majority of the, overwhelming majority of the verbs in English language are dynamic. You can easily use them in continuous tenses, in ing forms. But there are some verbs, though they are limited in number, there are some verbs in English language that cannot be used typically and traditionally, cannot be used in continuous tenses, in progressive tenses. For example, love. You can say I love you, but you cannot say I'm loving you. You cannot use the verb love in continuous tense. In the same way, you can say I hate you, but you cannot say I'm hating you. That's considered as inappropriate. That's not considered as traditionally correct sentence. And also, you can talk about verbs like decide. Decide is also a verb that cannot be used in continuous tenses. You cannot say I'm deciding, or he was deciding. So I will decide, I may decide, I can decide. Only in non-dynamic form, in non-progressive form you can use them. And in the same way, the verb like, for example, murder. He was murdering him, not considered correct. So in this way, there are some verbs that cannot be actually used in progressive or continuous tenses. They are called as static verbs, and those that can be easily used in progressive or continuous tenses, they are called as dynamic verbs. I hope you have got it. And luckily for you, majority of the verbs that are used in English language, they are dynamic. Static verbs, let me give you one or two tips to identify them. Static verbs are, generally speaking, those that show internal processes. Love is something internal, hated something internal, decided something internal, or those verbs that show one-time act, one-time action. For example, murder is a one-time act. You cannot keep murdering someone. So if a verb refers to one-time action only, not continuous, then it can be called a static verb. And if a verb shows only internal process, internal action rather than external observable action, this verb will also be called as static verb. So such verbs are static, typically speaking, and others that are observable, that are external, that represent external action, that represent observable action, and that those that represent continuous action, they are called as dynamic verbs. I hope you have got the idea. Let's talk about the last kind of verb in the end, and it is here. It is finite and non-finite verb. Finite verb and non-finite verb. Now the question is, what is a finite verb? Simple to understand. It's written over here, a verb that is affected by the person and number of the subject is called as finite verb. And non-finite verb is the exact opposite, that is not affected by the person and number of the subject. Let's talk about the examples. Let me elaborate it, illustrate it. He is watching TV. He is watching TV. If I use they, change the number from singular to plural. This is singular, this is plural. He is singular and there is plural. He is watching TV. If I change he into they and change the number from singular to plural, then they is watching TV is correct? No. Then you will have to use they are watching TV. So see, when the number of the subject is changed from singular to plural, automatically the verb has to be changed. Such a verb is called as finite verb. So is a finite verb. Are is a finite verb. And even if I use I is watching TV, wrong. I are watching TV, wrong. you will have to use I am watching TV. So see, you have to change the verb for I. For I it is am, for they it is are, for he it is. All three of them will be called as finite verbs. Is it clear? So let's come to our next one. Eat. You eat a lot. What about this one? He eat a lot. Wrong. You will have to use he eats a lot. See, for this one, eat. For this one, eats. So you have to change the number. You have to change the verb according to the change in the number and in the person. There are three persons. First person, I, second person, you, third person, he, she, it, or they. So you have to change it according to the. In the same way, I love cricket. What about she? She loves cricket. So see, as the person changes, this is singular and this is also singular. But this is first person and this is third person. So this is first person pronoun, this is third person pronoun. As the person changes, person of the subject changes, automatically the verb changes. As the number of the verb changes from singular to plural, then remember in this case, for example, then you have to change the verb. So we can say love or loves are finite verbs, eat or eats are finite verb, or am, they are finite verbs. To put it simple, I can say that two forms of the verbs, out of the 6 forms that I've discussed with you, 2 forms of the verb are actually finite. And what are they? General present tense form and third person singular form. They are finite forms of the verbs. They are finite verbs because they change as the number and the person of the subject changes. They are affected by the change in the number and the person of the subject. First form of the verb, to make it even simpler, first form of the verb is finite. All the other forms of the verb are non-finite. That's very clear. So first form of the verb, general present tense form, is also called as first form. Third person singular form is also called as first form. First form of the verb is actually finite form of the verb. All the others are actually non-finite. Keep that in mind. And in case of non-finite, the verb is not affected by the person or the number of the subject. He had money. What about this one? I had money. They had money. See, if you change from third person to first person, from singular to plural, no problem. They had money, correct. He had money, correct. So had is not affected by the number of the subject. He is singular, they is plural. They had money, absolutely correct. He had money, absolutely correct. I had money, absolutely correct. So no matter the subject is first person, second person, or third person, had remains the same, it is not affected. No matter the subject is singular or plural, had remains the same, it is not affected by the number of the subject, so it is called as non-finite verb. So the second form of the verb is non-finite. Remember that. Played. We played, no matter. I played, no matter. They played, no matter. Ali and Asad played, no problem at all. Played is never changed. I played cricket, correct. He played cricket, correct. We played cricket, correct. No problem whatsoever with them. And I visited Karachi, correct. We visited Karachi, correct. He visited Karachi, correct. So see, visited, which is the second form of the verb. Played, which is the second form of the verb. Had, which is the second form of the verb. They are not affected by the number and the person of their subjects. That's why they will be called as non-finite verbs. So third person singular form of the verb, general present tense form of the verb, they are finite verbs, and the second form, that is non-finite. And all the other forms, non-tense forms, they are definitely by temperament, they naturally they are non-finite. I hope you have learned something out of this extensive lecture that I have delivered on verbs, their forms, their kinds, and the rest of the things. In the end, I'm going to ask you some critical questions. Number one, remember kids, verb is considered as the most important word class, the most important part of speech. My question is, why is the verb considered as the most important word class? Why? Answer must not be more than 30 words. 30 words answer, please, not more than that. Why is verb considered as the most important word class? There are so many word classes. Nouns are there, pronouns are there, verb, adjective, adverb, determiner, preposition, conjunction, interjection. So many of them are there. But verb is considered as the most important word class. Why? Give some solid argument. Support your answer with some solid argument within the limit of the 30 words, not more than that. Next question is there any other word class that somehow shows action or event? I've just discussed the definition with you. Verb is a word that shows action or event. I asked you, is there any other word class that is somehow linked with or that somehow shows action or event? Think about it. Last question, a philosophical one. It's more difficult, but think about it. Somehow you might be able to find some answer. Humans are permanently tied with verbs. Human relationship with verb is of permanent connection. Humans are permanently connected with verbs. That's a statement. Humans are permanently connected, permanently related with, permanently tied with verbs. Explain this statement. How? I hope you have understood everything that I have tried to explain. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.